What do you do when your faith system no longer fits? Because sometimes you outgrow it. Sometimes you graduate, you ascend, you leave the old, itchy, worn-out way, and you begin to walk in the new. Sometimes you grow. Join the conversation with me, Tony Werfel, author, speaker, teaching pastor, as we help unwrap and rebuild a faith that no longer fits. We learn to walk into the new, messy journey called life. Hello everyone, and welcome back. I hope you have had a fantastic week. Today, I want to start by answering a question. Someone sent me this question. I thought it's a really interesting one, and it's one that I've heard often. And so, again, let's keep those conversations going. Let's keep sending in questions and just go back and forth. Sometimes we'll agree, sometimes we won't. But here's the question. The Bible and even the Word God has brought so much pain and divisiveness to the world. Why not just drop the Bible altogether? Why even use it anymore? So, I think it can definitely be argued that the Bible and religion in general has brought pain and brokenness, and there's been wars and all these things because of religious understandings and different views of their God, and them being, the remnant people, the us versus them. I think religion and the stories sometimes cause that, no doubt. So here's my answer. I believe that the narrative itself is important, and I would say it's important because it has value. And so for me, when I look back historically, throughout history, I see every movement, it needs some kind of narrative to guide it, to lead people to a better place. So a good story, no matter how literal or not, it has the potential to cause some serious growth and challenge the conventions of the day. It has the potential to lead people into deeper realities. So for Israel, the group that actually wrote this, that compiled all the poems and the narratives and the messages from kings, for Israel, this was their story. And it's also a story I grew up with. And truth be told, I was exposed to all sorts of ugly ways of viewing it. Ways that made certain epic accounts very literal, caused people to use it to weaponize rather than bring healing, caused me to not consider this life, but always the other world, the other thing to come. But I also believe everything is redeemable. So even though this book had become a curse to me at one point in my life because of certain literal approaches, I've learned I had to pick it back up again and had to read it as it was, I would argue, intended to be read. So when I understood that this compilation of poems and epic hero narratives, voices of challenge and hope, and an evolutionary process, so what I understood is this is a process of people becoming. People learning how to see the world and themselves and the divine much differently, much bigger. So it's a process of becoming. So I started to have a new appreciation for the book when I looked back. And so I also appreciate other narratives, though, with similar heroic journeys. I can find these same kind of themes of beauty, growth, justice, mercy, the divine, love, in pieces anywhere from like To Kill a Mockingbird, Great Expectations, War and Peace, Tolkien's books, Austen's female characters, they affront the traditional male-dominated cultures, Kurt Vonnegut, even sci-fi. I can find beautiful meaning in most stories. So for me, though, I chose not to throw the Bible out because I had so much baggage. What I did is I chose to heal. And I would argue to heal, I believe we have to face the things that we experienced that brought us so much pain. So I purposely use the Bible now, and I use other things as well, but I use the Bible because I don't want the baggage so many of my friends carry with them. So for some, even a reference in conversation, it brings like this heat wave of anger. But what if you could pick the book back up now? Even though you may not see it in some senses literally or see it a little differently, but what if you could still find beauty in it? When someone mentioned it to you, you could actually be really grounded and share in the beauty of the story. Not get so angry and offended, but say, you know what? I've learned to find beauty in this. I think that's a healthier way to go than simply demonize a book that has actually been very influential to a culture of people for so many centuries. It's been Judaism's book. So with that said, let's look at what it appears to be a really odd story, I would say. Again, this story I want to read to you seems so weird. So here we go. In Exodus 4:24 through 26, there's a really weird story. And again, if you were to simply look at it now, it would seem archaic, barbaric. It would seem like no reason to read these pieces. But when you begin to look at the history and understand the culture, the context, the story actually has a really deep meaning. Could make you a better human, I would say. So, anyways, the story is about Israel's God who chases Moses to murder him. So basically, in the middle of the night, this God is upset about something, and he seeks to murder Moses, the one that he chose as his instrument to free Israel, while Moses is still asleep. So his wife seems to be, and please read this yourself, you'll be like, what in the world? So while he's sleeping, his wife sees this God approaching. And like any loving wife, Zipporah, she takes a flint knife and cuts off her son's foreskin. If that's not messed up enough, right? Like you just heard me say that, yeah. She then places this bloody foreskin, this tip, on Moses' leg, and this somehow appeases Israel's, bloodthirsty God, who's described as the bridegroom of blood. So when you hear this, you got to be like, what is going on? What in the world? Why? This is crazy. And I would say, yeah, for our culture today, this is barbaric. It's insane. It's nonsensical. But and people actually have also tried to explain this thing away. They've said like, oh, well, God needed his son to be circumcised before he could go to Egypt. And, as if the Israelites were going to see Moses there and be like, hey, bro, I see you've brought your family. Mind if we check your son's foreskin? Need to make sure everything's on the up and up. Doubtful. No, that's not how this would have gone. Or Israel's God needed circumcision, or he'd need to murder people. It's very weird. Even people attempting to explain this thing, I've heard it. It just goes weird. So the idea here is actually much bigger, though, when you understand Israel. What we as a modern culture don't see is that there's actually deep history behind this awkward story that the ancient readers, they understood. It would be like me talking about an elephant and a donkey being at odds. We'd pick up immediately the illusions of divided politics. But what if thousands of years later, these symbols, we don't have these political parties anymore, these symbols wouldn't have the same value for those readers. And so they would have to do the responsible thing and look back at history, or the whole thing would fall apart. So that's what we're doing with this weird story. This sketchy story is actually part of a larger story. It's a piece of a larger narrative that these tribal people understood. So the story was part of a larger oral tradition for Israel. So first off, all throughout the Bible narrative, you'll see the divine approach man at night in the darkness of solitude. It's like this intimate moment. It's an intimate point. And there's silence. So there's room to breathe and to listen. That's the idea that it starts with. So even for us today, I wonder, do you have space in your schedule for this? Time for you to just stop, breathe, sit in the still of the night, listen? Because for the Hebrews, what they say is, in order for something miraculous to begin, you have to be able to sit in the silence a bit. So that's the idea that it starts with. So what the ancients often did in these narratives and in the poetry was that they would use a device called foreshadowing. and anyone studying literature, you get this already, foreshadowing. They would basically set up the story by giving like a smaller layer of the story first. So Moses, remember this, Moses in the literary sense is Israel miniaturized. So again, Moses is essentially just like Israel, saved by captivity of Egypt. He's saved because of Egypt, right? He would not have survived if he was not placed in Egypt's care, just like Israel is over and over again. Moses, just like Israel, is going to journey away from Egypt. He'll walk in the wilderness, he'll climb the mountain, and finally he'll walk into the new reality of Canaan. So understand, the story shows that a sacrifice of blood is needed to experience freedom. So the blood of his firstborn. So it's as if the writers are saying, in order to experience real freedom, it's going to take blood, sweat, and tears. It's not going to be easy. That's the idea here. And we're going to see it brought up again in the story of the Passover. So as you'll see, Israel will have this visual sign in the Passover of blood covering their houses, keeping them safe, their firstborn safe. So for many Jews, it's a beautiful metaphor for them, even though us, we're scratching our heads. For them, it was a metaphor for the sacrifice, the spinal fortitude that it takes to move away from slavery. It's going to take blood, sweat, and tears. So someone might ask the question, well, why the firstborn? Here's why. The firstborn for Israel is important because Israel sees themselves as the firstborn. Here's what they believed. They believed that they were the first to accept the divine's invitation to life. They were the firstborn. They were the first ones to have truth, to have this knowledge that no one else had, right? That's how they saw themselves. So I wonder, anyone listening right now, anyone a firstborn out there? You're the one that follows the rules. You take charge. You watch and frustration as the younger ones get all the grace and the gifts and all the things you felt you deserve. Any firstborns out there? Anyone out there? Because for me, I'm a firstborn. Before that younger sibling came into the picture, you, like me, you were lavished with love and affection, and mom and dad put all their time and energy into you. They took pictures of like every waking moment, from your first bowel movement to your first steps, right? Yet, if you're like me, the firstborn, you experienced a sense of loss, didn't you? When the new child came into the picture, you experienced loss. You saw that little bundle of poo, joy, you immediately resented it because this baby was taking mom and dad away from you. So you watch in awe, right? As your parents, they seem to relax in parenting, and you're saying like, why didn't I get that? They have the same bedtime as you. You were excited to have an hour later. Now they get the same thing as you. That kind of stuff is going on for Israel. They saw themselves as the older son. So this is why the story of like the prodigal son in the New Testament is so interesting to the Jews, because they saw themselves as the firstborn, the ones deserving of all the gifts, and yet they're getting frustrated. They're getting frustrated because mom and dad aren't being fair, right? They are the firstborn. So Isaiah 53, there's a description of Israel, how Israel saw themselves. It's not actually a reference toward Jesus, but it's a reference toward how Israel sees themselves as the older brother. It's filled with like phrases like filled with sorrows, despised, rejected, smitten by God sometimes, left alone by younger sibling empires to thrive. I think you get the point there. And so Israel, they see themselves as the firstborn. And if we're going to be honest, being the firstborn, it can actually lead to some pretty destructive patterns. So follow me on this. If we're going to be honest, firstborns, sometimes we feel so frustrated and there's so much loss because of this new person, that's coming to the family, that we'll actually treat our younger siblings worse than we felt we were treated. We will treat them terribly. Another thing that will often happen, these patterns we'll fall into, is we'll become one-uppers. And I've seen this in conversation over and over again. And so many of my friends who are the firstborns, they'll take on this role of like the second mother or father figure, and they have to one up everything. Every time someone comes to the room with like an interesting story, or hey, I reached this goal, or this really good thing happened, they become that annoying voice in the back. Well, well, that's fine, but think about this. They become that person. And like that person, it's so destructive. It's really painful to see. Another thing they'll do is they'll try to take over. Again, they'll be in charge. They'll tell you how to run your own life, and yet they're not really running theirs very compellingly. And they may even fall into the pattern of creating more rules for the younger sibling, even though they actually never had to follow those rules, but they'll create a lot more. So you can see, being the firstborn, you could react in some pretty unhealthy ways. And so it's all coming from these places of feeling insecure, feeling a loss. And this is what happens to Israel. This is how they view all other nations other than themselves. We were the chosen. We're the good ones. You don't deserve anything else. We deserve the best, while the rest of the world gets less. That was what Israel was falling into. They were the eldest son. I've been reading a lot of different books on psychology with in relation to the idea of the firstborn and parenting, because we've got 2 kids. The eldest we see fall into this over and over again. And so one of the beautiful things I read the other day was that firstborns, they can actually play a really positive role in the whole process of growth and change as a family. And so the firstborn, they can actually become a really nurturing presence in the family. So the firstborn, they actually sit at this place of potential and learning, and they can bring something powerful to the table. And so there's real beauty here. So the firstborn, if kind of directed in positive ways, can help raise those other siblings with the family. And yeah, it's going to take a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and it's going to feel like slavery sometimes. But the real message is they are part of bringing life to the world, life to the family. Here's some things I pulled from this book on firstborns, and I just want to share with you some ideas to help parents. Help them become better parents with the firstborn. And I hope you pick up on some of this, because the implications fit really well with Israel. So watch this. One of the things parents should do when helping the firstborn is they should avoid pressuring the firstborn, watch this, to be perfect. I grew up with that narrative my whole life. In the religious systems, you have to be perfect. You have to have it down. You have to follow these rules in order that you can be a part of this great escape someday. That was the narrative. You have to be perfect. And again, now I'm beginning to realize perfect, a static state of being, that's not even really compelling. But I was told that over and over again through the religious system, be perfect. And there are all kinds of verses in the Bible that you'll see, like, man, this idea, this way of life, I don't know how I could ever live up to that. Yet, what you'll also find all throughout the scriptures is that there's this idea of unconditional love. And so, even though Israel cries often, feels their God has left them, the story goes that there is more than enough love for everyone. No matter what you've done, you still deserve unconditional love. For yourself, from community, it's all there, unconditional love. And so the idea there is, for the firstborn, they too deserve unconditional love. And when they experience that, they learn to share it with others. Another thing I thought was interesting, they said, for that eldest child, reassure them that they have enough love for you, for them and the new baby. The baby they're viewing as the enemy. And so again, for Israel, when you read this, considering how the Jews viewed themselves and understand this, what Jesus does throughout his time sharing these stories and parables and all this, Jesus spends most of his time telling the Jewish nation, you have to love the younger brother, the non-Jew. And it's only through loving your enemy that you're going to experience life. And so the whole idea here, as a parent, if your two kids can't learn to show each other love, understanding there is enough love from both mom and dad for both of them, they're always vying and arguing for that love, you're going to have war in the family all the time. But learning how to interact with others, how to knowing that there is enough blessing for everyone. When you can get to that place as a people, as a nation, then warring and tribalism and ugly religious arguments back and forth, those things become obsolete because there is enough blessing, there is enough goodness in the world for everyone. Beautiful. Another thing that we've learned for our eldest is I'll pull my iPhone out and I'll go through like different pictures, or we'll even take, the actual hard copies of pictures. What we'll do is we'll show them pictures and videos and all of them when they were younger. And we do this because it actually helps. When they're able to stop and consider their life, consider how good it's been, see their life again, it's really pretty powerful. They'll laugh and they'll point out, oh, I was so little then. Now get this. For these ancient people, this is why they write the Bible. This is why they write Torah, why they compile it all. Because I would argue, when you view not only your story, but your enemies, when you learn to walk in their shoes, when you look at your story and you begin to understand it, you can begin to kind of find, oh, we keep falling into this kind of cycle over and over again. And I think there should be change. And you also see really beautiful things that happen that you want to repeat, and the destructive things that you don't. Taking time to look over your story is really important. And then another thing was a piece of advice they gave. And again, if you don't have kids, understand there's a far deeper idea here that I'm sharing. Another thing it said was help your kids obtain privacy when they need to play with a friend by arranging these special play dates or special activities for the younger kids. So the idea that psychologists say for the eldest is basically find time to allow them to experience common ground with mom and dad. And I think this is a really beautiful one too. Because for the Hebrews, we don't see this teased out very often in the narrative. Because what binds most people who are different, who have different ways of viewing the world, who don't see eye to eye, it's not actually a common belief system that often brings connection. Real connection, because we're going to always find different ways of differing views, right? Here's what I've found over and over again brings people together. I've found that acts of justice bring people together. It's the Hindu, the Muslim, the Christian, the Jew, the Catholic. When we experience injustice in the world, we all have an opportunity to nurture the world. And when we come together with the soup kitchen, the protests, the community coming together after hurricanes, if we come together during these moments, those are the things that actually can bring real repair, real life for all of these brothers and sisters, people who don't always see eye to eye. It's those moments that we can find commonality in the narrative of justice. That's beautiful to me. The last thing was encourage your oldest to speak about any anger or jealousy that she has about the younger sibling. I love this one. These ideas, they're normal emotions. Letting the kids know these are emotions. It's okay. And it's better to get these things out than hold them inside. And so as a parent, I allow my kid to speak. And I'll be honest with you, when I think of religion in my own tribe that I've been in, all throughout my career, we've all experienced anger, frustration with these different systems. And I've been told over and over again, Tony, just love the church. Speak positive about the church. Pretend that you don't see the negative. But let's be honest for a moment. For most of us listening to that, you've acquired a good amount of religious baggage. The least helpful thing you can do is pretend you don't have it. So I would say maybe sometimes you need to vent. You need to shake your tiny fist toward heaven. You need to allow yourself to be angry. Say, this thing, it actually brought me the idea of original sin, the idea that I'm evil and inherently bad, I'm always going to do the wrong thing. That was actually a really low view of myself and the world, and actually ruined my self-esteem as a kid. Being able to say that, be angry about it for a bit, that is so important. And so even when you view the Bible, you'll see there's this entire book, Lamentations. It's an entire book written about being frustrated, about systems and the religious tribe and God. And that book right there, the beauty is they didn't try silencing that voice. They actually gave it space to breathe. And so they encouraged the siblings to speak to the frustrations, the angst. They didn't try silencing them. They asked them to step forward, share the thing. Don't be quiet religious mannequins that have big smiles and they're dying inside. They invite people to speak. So here's the thing. The oldest brother, Israel, is learning to slowly handle their anger, their jealousy, their bend toward fairness, and their need for vengeance over their sibling empires. This is not easy. This is life, right? And this is why Jesus spends so much time speaking to the eldest brother, the Jewish nation. His entire ministry is focused on calling them into a loving, compassionate relationship with the rest of the world. Because, let's be real, love is the only action that's going to lead to any kind of resurrection, new life, restoration. It's only through that. And so if you find yourself as the eldest son or daughter, the one feeling this angst and frustration, understand it's only going to be through learning how to be good to the others, learning how to play well with the others, how to share love, restoration, how to nurture others. I had 2 moments this week. I wanted to share them. They're very short. One came from an elder brother. Not literal. It came from an older individual online. And I posted this video of our praise and worship band. And they were so good that week. And I wanted to affirm them. And so I'm proud of how good they sound. And then sometimes I forget that this different style of music, it can sometimes be offensive to various trolls online. And so one such troll, who often takes delight in posting these vitriolic comments about music, the LGBT community, crazy, gross comments about like the Pope being the beast and all this crazy stuff. He makes this comment, and this is a flippant comment, about the music being offensive. And of course, me being me, I should have just hit defriend, but instead I let him know that, those comments aren't desired here, that kind of thing. But here's the sad truth. Many people will take that role, the accuser, the eldest, the one in the right, and they'll brutally hurt people. And they'll assume the role as like the religious ethic whistleblower. That's who they become. But the reality is we have plenty of those people. The world needs more people who affirm and love and nurture and grow people. We need those kind of elder brothers, not the angry troll who's going around telling everyone what they think they need to do and how they need to live their lives. We don't need those people. We have far too many of them. We need nurturing people. And that's why I want to end with this story. I met a new friend this past week. His name's Keith. And Keith is a loving, kind person who seems to just attract people because he's loving, he's compassionate. And so we sat down and he asked me to share my story. And so of course I shared it. And he actually listened. And I think you get this, what I mean by this. When I'm speaking, he's not looking at his phone. His eyes were squarely on me. I had his full attention. And so he really listened. And he asked all sorts of questions. No agenda, but to just allow me to feel heard. He didn't draw lines, didn't push certain ideas he had. He just listened. And after I shared my story with Keith, what was so powerful to me is he stood up and he said, "I'll walk with you, brother. I will walk with you." Keith, he has a story. He's been hurt. He's had some vicious stuff happen to him. He could easily be angry and hurt by the world. He could be demanding blood, But instead, Keith chooses to walk with people in the messy, dirty, bloody journey of life. He's willing to sacrifice and share what he has. He's willing to walk with other people. And today, I'd invite you to do the same. No pressures of drinking certain religious Kool-Aid, no lines drawn for acceptance, no ulterior motives, just love. So today, I would invite you, lay down your need to be right. Begin walking with others like that today. Become a nurturing presence to people. Walking in the bloody, messy, chaotic journey, even though we don't agree, yet still walking together, finding common ground wherever we can. That's the kind of life, I think, that just pops. It's so beautiful. It's so good. And so, again, if you find yourself in the elder brother or sister position, may you not be the person that gets angry and jealous. But maybe, even if you are in the right, even if you know you have the higher position, what if you chose to nurture people and love them rather than send out angry, hateful stuff online or in conversation? What if you helped nurture people instead? Everyone, take care. And as always, please visit my page, tonywerfel.com. Post a comment on iTunes. We could use more. However you want to do it. Become a Patreon supporter. We could use all the support we can. The podcast is doing well. It's been exciting. Anyways, I will talk to you next week. Blessings.